Ready, more or less ready. Let's start. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and all those things. I'm today being doubly recorded. I'm being recorded on the presentation and I'm being recorded on here. So I'm wired for sound like you can't believe. Who of you have received feedback on your assignment 1? Who of you have not received feedback? Oops. Okay. I need you, and I think we will distribute a list later, just to write down who hasn't received. There has been some problems with assignment 1. Who of you found it easy to do? Who of you found it fairly okay to do? They don't know. Of those who got feedback back, who passed the assignment? Okay. That's great.
Very low.
It is.
Well, then I passed. The pass rate is 50%.
Okay. So who of you have not yet handed in? Who have you not yet handed in? Why on earth did you not hand in?
I had a problem with my topic arrangement.
You had to deal with it. Okay. You are getting another opportunity to hand in. Okay. So the assignment will be open again, and you can and hand in next week again.
We'll create a new assignment.
Okay, we'll create a new assignment. You are not going to get the opportunity to get better marks. But the total problem statement is so critical in your work. We want to get a little bit of reflection here and have people comfortable with what they're doing. So what we're going to do is there's going to be another opportunity to get feedback. Some of the people I've seen here, I've seen earlier today when we had a little bit of chat about the assignment 1 and 2. Who of you are not scheduled either for today, have been, or scheduled for Saturday?
I sent out the schedule for Saturday earlier.
Who's not scheduled for Saturday? Oops. Okay. There is another opportunity next Thursday afternoon. I would recommend that you have some serious discussions with your supervisors. We really don't want to see you on your own. We would like to have you and your supervisor together so that we can go through that. The aim is definitely not to give feedback that your supervisor is not aware of. Okay. So Thursday, and Prof. Barry will be handling that. We're probably starting at 1 again and go to just before the class. So that's still the opportunity.
Okay. And 4 o'clock is already taken.
4 o'clock is already. Okay. Do you remember this little model that I showed you at the beginning? It really talks to the fact that the research, and the only reason this is not a flat and linear process, is that I've bent it up in a U so that it can be circular. If you look there, you start from the problem area, you come to the research problem, you phrase the research question and you structure it. Although that is only a small block, that is at the heart of your research. If you've done that solidly and thoroughly, it is likely that you will be able to execute the rest of your research because a lot of your planning is in there. Yes, you still have to do your research design, but a lot of what you're thinking about what to do, you've done in that block. Those 3 talks to assignment 1, assignment 2, and assignment 3. Okay? So you should be fairly, and we know that it's a bit difficult. So assignment 3 will have a slight extension. For those of you that have handed in, there will be an opportunity for you to rethink about it. Now, the problem is that unless you've got your problem tightly squeezed into a box, it's going to be very, very difficult to do assignment 3. Assignment 3 starts with your research problem that you then phrase as a question. So if you haven't got a tight grasp on what your problem is, you will be going through a lot of the analysis in assignment 3 without getting anywhere. So we want you to be very, very solid and comfortable about what assignment 1 is about specifically before we carry on. So what this is about, remember, in assignment 1, and I'm just going to go over why it's important because it's really critical. You have a problem area. Your topic gives an identification as to approximately where that problem area is going to be, but it's not your problem area. Okay? So you've got an overall problem area, a context, something that you're working at, and you have a research problem. It's not straightforward to get there. For those of you that have written your context, a lot of you struggled with that. Your context is really where you're talking about how you're going to come down to your research problem. Research problem itself should be not more than one sentence. This is the problem. Next sentence, this is the consequences of the problem. That's your research problem. But all the writing that makes it so logical that this is your research problem goes in initially. Remember the substantiation. Some of you manage the substantiation from the body of knowledge quite well. Who of you have got enough referencing in assignment 1 to show where your problem is? Academic referencing. Okay. So you've got a good idea now, and probably you've done some more reading, you've got a better idea of where you should substantiate it. Who of you struggled with the empirical substantiation? Okay, now I've had some discussions with some of you. Empirical substantiation is not what you believe. Okay, it may be I know, but you really have to support that argument. So you will be using things such as industry documentation, government documentation, things that support the fact that you think that this is a problem. It may not map and say exactly this is a problem. It can talk to some aspects of that problem, but there should be enough evidence there that industry believe this is a problem, it's a real problem, and theoretically this is an appropriate problem. You cannot go around just putting your view in there because it's got to be substantiated. This is an academic qualification. So if you look at that and you have to redo this, what are you going to do to improve your substantiation? Do some of you have a better idea by now? Or you're still struggling? This is deathly quiet. I'm going to engage with you just now. People that sleep are certainly going to participate in the conversation. So you want to get to that first block. The next thing why it is such a critical issue is that your research problem is what your whole research study pivots around. You have to have a direct alignment from your problem area down to the structuring and coming out again to the very end of your conclusion of your work. But it also tells me what the title of my document should be and what the aim is. So when you develop the title, it should have the same kind of words that happens to be in your research problem. If your research problem that you've agreed with your supervisor is not reflected in your title, you will end up having to fix that. I don't think any of you have yet registered a title, have you? Okay. So we're going to get through and we're going to try and get you to register a title that you'll be able to continue with all the way. Okay. What does this mean? Until you have got assignment 1 accepted and a decent mark for it, you can really not proceed. Okay. You can do the other assignments. You'll get a lot of benefit from doing the assignments, but you will not be able to develop either your short summary that you have to hand in the 150 words or your proposal. This is the heart of your research. So, who of you have and I know which ones of you have done it, have determined what their research problem is and had their supervisors agree with them. Okay? Very few of you, isn't it? The rest of you? Haven't you got? You have another opportunity. You can meet your supervisor. I know of people that really, really hounded their supervisors. Okay? You can sit there and you can wait for your supervisor. You won't be accused of stalking your supervisor, harassment, or, until it gets really bad, but you have a right to have time. So, have you made an appointment with your supervisor? Have you tried to make an appointment with your supervisor? Okay. Who's tried to have an appointment and not yet had one? Ooh. Okay. Whose research is this? Whose degree are we talking about? Your supervisors or yours? You've got to take ownership of this, guys. Please, you have a right to your supervisor's time. According to what you have as a memorandum of understanding, if you've had that signed, you have an agreement with your supervisor as to how often you should meet. And you can sort out a lot by discussing it with your supervisor. Now, we're facilitating or we're taking part of some of these conversations through the scheduled appointments. But the reality is you should be having those conversations with your supervisor so that you can agree and discuss where you are. If you've got assignment 1 structured, even as it's now, it will enable you to talk to your supervisor. Okay. You have nearly a week to see your supervisor to get an up-to-date, solid anchoring point for your research. Because when you hand in assignment 1 this time, it should be very close to what will anchor your research overall. Who of you foresee a lot of problem in meeting your supervisor over the next week? Why?
I think my challenge is right now I don't have a supervisor.
Okay, some of you have caretaker supervisors.
I don't have either. I spoke to Prof. Diaker, and then he said he can assist me provided I change my topic. So my problem is right now I've done the assignment 1, assignment 2, you know, my literature and everything. So I feel like it's too late to do that.
The problem was that she wasn't on the original list from the department.
So it was.
The department originally told her she had to change her topic. So there's
Okay.
a challenge.
Okay, that challenge I think needs to be, you need to see what you have to do. If you need to develop a proposal without any guidance, is there any chance that anybody will supervise you if you can execute it? Will you be able to get a supervisor for what you want to do?
Not in the department.
Not in the department.
Oops. Remember, one of the things I stated very clearly, please make sure your problem is within your discipline. It's really, really difficult.
I think my problem is there's someone who's already doing almost the same thing within the department. So that's my biggest challenge. She said,
Okay, then that means that you will never get ethical clearance. No matter what you do, universities do not give ethical clearance on similar work.
okay, now I'm ready to change the topic.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem to do that. And then he also promised me that he can supervise me. But the problem is, what about all this work that I'm doing?
All this work, if you have to do it again on another topic, will it take you the same amount of time? No. What we're teaching you now is we're teaching you the process just to think. It is likely that some of you will, in the process of your research, find out that the research problem that you started with is in fact not the research problem that you should be working on as you get more and more information. Remember, you will continuously adjust just everywhere in the process. So if you adjust somewhere in the process, you have to go retrofit, do the other work again. But you know what you must do. You know how to think about it. You have acquired the competencies to think about it. You just have to do it again.
So for now, I must just continue.
No. try and change it as soon as possible, because you want to hand in a proposal. So try to change it as soon as possible. If there's a problem with your timelines, talk to Professor Barry so that your timelines could, you know, you may get an opportunity there. But it would be wasteful for you to continue. Okay, but what you've done is not wasted because it's what you've learned. Anybody else? Yes?
Would it be possible to change the wording of the topic? Even though the content might be the same, but the wording has changed.
This is not my problem. What does your supervisor say? It's your supervisor that must be able to give you that guidance.
No. I'm just saying that within next year we are trying to possibly see our blind spot.
Yeah,
So we had a similar problem in some particular department,
yeah.
whereby just rearranging the wording of the topic, it gives another one.
Yes, you can. Those things are not yet formally incarcerated in stone, permanently there, gone, never to move. You can change your title later. It's just a pain in the butt to do. So what we're trying to do now, of course, if you find out your topic is not quite suitable, you will be adjusting it. That's what she's going to do. You will be adjusting those things, but we want you to, by the end of assignment 1, when you've now redone it, to have a very, very good grasp of what it is that you're going to do and to be able to capture that and substantiate it. If you've got this down, the rest should be fairly logical. Nobody believes me. Absolutely no. Nobody believes me. Okay, for those of you, when we discuss it on Saturday, the ones that we discuss it, we'll go into more details. Now, who of you have started phrasing a hypothesis when you have not had feedback on your assignment 1 even? This is quite scary. You cannot phrase an hypothesis until after you've gone through and analyzed your question, done assignment 3, and worked out what kind of question you have to beat up to become a hypothesis. You can't do it. So until you've got your problem solidly down and your research question solidly down, you really can't move forward much. You can acquire the skills, you can find out how to do it, but you cannot really work with your problem. So we need to get assignment 1 pinned down and agreed either with your supervisor or those of you that have got caretaker supervisors in the department with that person. So you have to have some agreement that this is okay. And the way that you get that agreement is by getting feedback on assignment 1, which you're going to hand in, assignment 1 version 2, that you're going to hand in, that this is acceptable. So you need to get that. If you haven't seen your supervisor yet, please go and see your supervisor. Just by seeing your supervisor, you'll get through that assignment much quicker. But don't go and see them without attempting to do that assignment, because then you haven't yet structured your own thoughts. And even if you've struggled to structure your own thought, you need to discuss this more, at least. And all of you know how difficult it is to put down the stuff on assignment 1. It sounds so obvious. You've spent months thinking about this. You've discussed it from every angle. Why is it that putting it down in a few words is so difficult? Your mind is fluid. You adapt, you can understand different things. But if you've got to pin it down, you've got to be so precise, and that's difficult. We understand, we acknowledge it's not easy. It's not that we think it's easy. Nobody thinks it's easy. It's a difficult process. But we want you to go through that and get that down. Because if you've got that down, the rest will follow. Okay. So, let's quickly go through some bits of a problem statement. Please look at that, and you can go back to your previous assignments, slides. That was on top. It must be relevant to your discipline. Okay? If you're in marketing and your research problem is not a marketing problem, you have a problem. and that is not a researchable problem, okay? You cannot change departments. If you want to do an MTech in a department that you didn't do your BTech in, you have a big problem because you have to redo your BTech, okay? You can do that. Nobody prevents you from doing that. But you won't be accepted into a department that you've not done your BTech in. And similar, you're not going to get accepted into a department for DTech if you haven't done your MTech. There. Okay. You are free to change your mind about what area, but then you've got to put the underbuild in. Okay? So if you want to do an M in a different department, you've got to invest in some time to get your B in that department. So if you don't want to go that way, just be sensible. You're not trying to change the world. You are trying to acquire skills. The fact that you do it in one problem doesn't mean that it's got to be perfect. You can put that information, that skills, in any other problem. And in your work, in the rest of your research, you can work in whichever department's area that you want to. But if you've got those skills, you can carry on. The next one, is this a real problem? Can you substantiate it? When you had to fill out those things, where do you substantiate it from? And some of you have actually managed to incorporate a lot of that substantiation into the first part already. Was that easy? If we've read a lot more, you've looked at what the empiric data is, do you think it will be easier for you? Because unless you can substantiate that this is a problem and a real problem, it's a problem in industry, it's a problem in the academic fields, in the literature, you can't move forward either. Because if it's not a problem that is big enough to warrant investigation and big enough to, at the right level, to actually get you the qualification you want, it doesn't help. Now, I've spoken to some people that are trying to do simultaneously 4 or 5 M's. They just can't. There's so many exciting problems that they can't settle on one. I don't know how many of you have that problem. From what I've read, it seemed to be more than one person. Make your mind up. Which one do you want to do? There's not a right problem and a wrong problem. When you ask what is your problem, the question is really, what problem do you want to do your research in? You've got to make up your mind. You can be guided by your supervisor, but you know what? I don't want to do another master's. So I can't go around giving you my problem. You've got to come up with a problem that you have discovered and that you want to do. And in fact, when you get your degree, that's one of the things that we state, that you are capable to find a problem and articulate it. So don't try and change the world. Find the problem that you can do and that you want to do. You want to know at a D level that it will contribute. Who of you are at a D level now? Who are the D? Okay. Have you yet found out that your problem is really not addressed in the body of knowledge? It's quite scary. Because if you find out about 2 months before you hand in that somebody's just published the answer to your research problem, you're stuck. Okay? So your problem about being an M with the topic already chosen is nothing compared to having a D problem and somebody else did it. Then you've got to really go back and do a lot of fitting. Yeah?
My question is, we've been talking a lot about this BOK, but how do you know if it's addressing BOK?
The body of knowledge. You have to have read enough so that you feel comfortable and your supervisor feels comfortable that there is nothing in that. That's why you have a supervisor that's in your field. And you can tell me it's a problem. I'm going to look at you and I'm not quite actually sure if it's a problem because I'm not up to speed in your field. So the reason why you have a supervisor in your field is because that person can help you make a judgment call. But we do not have the luxury in South Africa to have people that specialize in very narrow areas and you come and follow them exactly in the same area. So you have to be very sure. That's why we say 50 articles. 50 articles is not a massive amount, but if you've done that and you've done proper searches, it is likely that you have a good idea of what's cooking at the moment. If you find out during your literature review, your full literature review, that you have a problem here, you don't have the right problem, then you go and you retrofit and you fix up the problem so that you have a problem that you can contribute. That is why you continuously read. You stop doing your literature review at the moment that you hand in. When you push that final print button, then you don't have to read anymore. But if you get sent back for either re-examining or fixing, then you continue reading. Because then you're still open. You're in a competitive race. That's why we register titles. That's why doctoral titles get registered in this country. Okay? So that you know at least you're not competing with anybody in South Africa. But there's a massive world out there. Okay? So it's really your problem is at the heart. You've got to get it. And I can't tell you if you've gone through the body of knowledge. Your supervisor can guide you. But it's very unlikely that you have the luxury of a supervisor that is so close to the cutting edge that they know exactly what's being published now. It takes some time. You know how much time it takes to just stay on top of things. And in some fields, maybe about 20 articles a day, or if not more. Now, how do you think anybody's going to stay on top of it? Okay. Who owns the problem? We're going to talk about who owns it, but you have, yes?
One of the challenges I have is that I'm looking at articles from 2009.
Yeah.
But the majority of interesting articles are the ones that are, that have been, like today, I picked up a very good article that has made me to change somewhere a little bit.
But that is what's going to happen.
Firstly, back to 1952.
Yes, but it's important, guys. Remember I told you about seminal articles? That 1952 article is probably something that had such a major input on the field. That was the beginning. You better know that beginning and you better have read it yourself. If that is so important, the seminal articles, especially at your doctoral level, you need to be there. You need to have read. Yeah, where you find the key ones, that you've got to continue doing that. And as you read, you will find out if this is really a doctoral level. That's you are racing against a competition. Okay. And if you were working in a high-tech environment in electronic engineering or something like that, you are really racing. Okay. So it's important. Somehow you're being protected although you might find it frustrating that somebody else is doing that, you're protected within South Africa. The moment you've registered your research title, which is a reflection of your problem, you've demarcated that. Nobody in South Africa may move forward on your space as long as you progress at the right pace. But you can't say that for the rest of the world. Okay. So, who owns the problem? We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. What other contributions can I make? All of these will come out now. What benefits can I get? And I hope that you found out at least one or two good benefits. When positioning yourself for a new career, what are you trying to do there? Can you live with this problem? You're going to spend a long time with this problem. Do you really like it? Or are you just doing it because of it? You may not feel passionate about it, but are you willing to live with it? Because you're going to spend it. And can you get a suitable supervisor? It's a last one. If you can't get a supervisor in the problem area that you really want to do, then you really have no choice. You can carry on that problem and you can hunt for the next 5 years until you find somebody that's willing to supervise you on that problem. Or you can decide, listen, let's compromise and find something suitable that's in my discipline, and I can find a supervisor. This is the real life. We're not trying to change the world, we're trying to get degrees. Okay. We've spoken about this substantiation. Okay. Who owns the problem is really important. It doesn't really, we don't really talk about that. But what it tells you is fundamentally, it tells you where are you going to make your practical contribution. Not your body of knowledge, but your practical contribution. These guys own the problem, so if I can help solve the problem, I do something positive for the people that own the problem. Okay. That's the first thing. It also tells you where your rationale comes from. A lot of you struggled with the rationale for the study. So the way you deal with the rationale for the study is not to take the template and cut out that part that says rationale for the study. You still have to have a rationale for the study. It's really important. In your proposal presentation, you're going to talk about this. So what is the rationale? Part of your rationale is to help solve this problem that whoever is owning. And very often, you might think it's a problem. You have it absolutely clear in your mind, this is a problem. But unless you know who owns the problem, you don't know where you're going to find your substantiation, and you don't know if it's a real problem either. It gives you an idea where you're going to find your empirical data. The people that owns the problem are likely going to be the sort of places that you're going to start looking for gathering data on. And more than anything else, and that's a part that you're going to have to grapple with, and especially at the D level, you might think the problem is owned by one party, but it might be owned by more than one group. Okay? And those people may not agree with this about what the problem is. So let's talk about the fun and games that started this week Tuesday morning when the aeroplane touched down on Waterkloof. Okay. We all agree there's a problem. I'm sure we can get lots of evidence. What's the problem? There's a lot of things there, but who owns the problem? Is this the Gupta's problem? Is it the government's problem? And what part of the government? The poor guy that got suspended? Or wherever the ideas come from? Or the guys that allowed them to land? Or the people that signed them on from home when they came and they got registered in the country? Whose problem is it? At the moment, there are so many people who has this problem. SARS is probably the guys, because, with Al Capone, with all those things, Malema, you can do anything. Don't get SARS upset with you. Under no circumstances do you get SARS upset with you. So probably they're going to be the ones with the heaviest. But who owns the problem? And this is a very obvious example. But in all of your research problems, there might be more than one party. Just because you think that's the problem does not mean that somebody else does not see exactly the same problem from another perspective. So you have to be very sure, and you've got to think about it. Who owns the problem? Who's experiencing this problem? And yes, if it's at least the one positive thing about it being SARS's problem is probably that something will get done about it. What was it about? Okay, so if you have conflicting ideas, or even if does the problem exist? Is it a problem? How big is the problem? What kind of problem is it? What you're likely going to contribute? So ultimately, in assignment 1, you have to be able to do the following. You have to tell us, this is the background, the context, the domain. You can substantiate it, and you can get a research problem out of it. And it's doable, it will contribute, all those things. Unless you can do this, you cannot move forward with your research. And even if you've done it and you've moved forward, it may very well be that at some point something will happen that you have to refine this. Okay? Because ultimately, you can't start there and just continue writing and end up there. This document must form a cohesive whole. I think the current statement is that even if we know you know it's a problem, it doesn't help unless you've written it down. Professor Barry has a chainsaw, and when it's really important and you try and convince us that you know it's a problem, we'll have to look in your brain to see if it's a problem. But unless you can write it down, you cannot convince your audience. And that is going to be difficult. So your problem and your answer must be fully aligned. So if halfway in the middle you find out, oops, it's not going to work, you've got to pull everything into alignment again. But if you've done it solidly from the beginning, it's more unlikely that you'll have to do it often. Problem is a statement with consequence. Now there's some text that actually conflate the problem in a research question. They might actually tell you that the problem is stated in the form of the question. That implies a very positivist attitude, because in there it's not that necessary to distinguish between them, but it's not technically correct. So your problem is a statement with a consequence. Your aim is, I will solve this problem in order to address the consequences. Okay. That's the format for your assignment. You've seen it. Okay. You can't cut one part out of it just because you don't like it. You can't take bits of it and just put down your 150-word summary because that's what you have. You actually have to separate that. And there's a reason for that. When you start separating it, you start understanding what you don't understand about this problem yet. What don't you know about it yet? What's the context? Exactly. And describe it. What's your problem exactly in one sentence, please? What sources will you use to substantiate it, practice it empirically? And why are you going to do this research? If you can't say that, and preferably when you get stopped, when you're busy with your doctorate, if you got stopped in the middle of the night, people ask you, what's your doctorate about? You've got to be able to say that. Later you can add a little bit of things of how you're going around proving it, but that's what you've got to say. Okay. Context is a difficult one to actually tell you what it is that you've got to put in there, because it's difficult to describe it. Everybody's context is specifically their problem's context. So I can't go around telling you this is the recipe, but I can tell you that this is the problem context in which your problem exists. So you can't start off with context there and somehow get to a problem somewhere out of line. It's got to be pretty much in line. It should also, in a way, introduce the actual owners of the problem. This is experience, evidence, evidence, evidence. So you actually tell people who the owners is. If you want to use a specific theoretical framework, say you want to work with complex adaptive systems, you have to describe the system, which will explain to you that it's a complex adaptive system. If you're looking at actors, you will have to introduce the actors. There's different things. So if you want to use a very overall theory, you've got to position that. Should give the context for the rationale. The rationale should follow straight out of it. It tells you why on earth should I deal with this problem. And it's also the context that will tell you where's your contribution, both your literature contribution and your theoretical, because in your context you've already stated that it's a problem in the literature and theoretically, and in practice. So what will your mapped? Is that clear? Are you struggling to understand me? Okay. The rationale has to be stated in terms of what is needed. This is now a short summary. What is needed by the theory? What is needed in practice? And at doctoral level, you've got to be clear about there is nothing, or there is limited, or there is not appropriate, or something information available. You've got to clearly articulate it. It's also linked to what the benefits will be to the owners or the other stakeholders. And in South Africa, it's very important that you actually articulate it in terms of the development imperative of South Africa. especially at the doctoral level. It's one of the criteria that people evaluate. It's one of the things that government drives incredibly hard, is that we need to increase the number of doctoral qualifications, which are all in the pipeline, some of you closer to the end and the others maybe lower down, because this is linked to the development. Okay, so it's really important. That's what we're going to look at that. Now, the one thing I want to talk about there is the awareness of the ethical consideration. I saw one person just now who were talking about nutritional needs for children. Who's that? Okay. That was a very, very well phrased and articulated. For those of you that struggle with the English, that was a very good example. Some bits he just wiped out. You know, he just didn't think that some bits were important. He just didn't do them. But that part was very well done. But if you look at that, in there he clearly states that doing research on kids, was it kids and a sensitive area, is going to be sensitive and ethically a problem. So I don't want a heading that say, oops, this is the ethical awareness. I want to be able to read in there that if there's a problem, you're aware of it. You're just aware of it. You don't have to say what you're going to do, but you're aware of it. Who's it that is doing the TB work? Who's doing the TB? Yeah, okay. In her case, she considered initially doing work on HIV, but she's going to have to talk to the people at the clinic. Now, it is a massive ethical issue if you want to talk, because people are not, you may not ask them if they're HIV positive. So there's going to be issues about ethically engaging with this research. So that's the kind of thing we need you to be aware of. But unfortunately, you have comorbidity. So when you're looking at TB, you probably have a likelihood of HIV at the same time. And that's a sensitive area that you'll have to deal with, if that is the issue. So we want to know that you've got awareness. Do you actually know where you're going to get close to it? It's not what you're going to do about it. Just, are you aware of it? Okay.
Ria, sorry. Before I forget, Ria sent me 4 problem statements from previous workshops that she did that the students did very well in. So I've loaded those 4 problem statements on the wiki. You will see when you go to the workshops, it says supervisor handouts, or supervisor workshops, student workshops, and then problem statement examples. Okay. And there are 4 examples there, because I think that looking at an example might guide some of you that were unsure about what to do.
Please don't think that that example is at the right level. That was for people that did very, very small manuscriptions. Okay? So it's not really at a thorough level.
Yeah, so what we'll do is from this workshop,
We'll
we will then put some of the good ones on for the next workshop.
But it will tell you what kind of things you've got. So it's not deep enough for any of you. Okay? Definitely not deep enough for doctoral, but it gives you an indication. Okay. Any further questions about problem statements? Are you feeling a little bit more comfortable? Yes.
Look, I think, myself, the fact, if you look at rationale and context, I got confused between the two. I struggled to differentiate what is exactly meant by each. And I think now, there'll be some real movement forward because we'll be able to pull them apart.
Yeah, they're not separate. They are pretty interlinked. So getting confused they're pretty interlinked. The rationale is just a much more condensed, and you want to be able to give sort of a 1 paragraph rationale where the context goes over 2-3 pages. Okay. Everybody happy? Okay. Yeah, sorry?
Actually, I still have a problem with the issue of body of knowledge, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm failing to link it exactly. I think I've got confusion with that.
What about that?
Identifying a body of knowledge. I think that's my problem.
Okay. Remember the whole thing about the pink ping pong balls in China? It's unlikely some people find a convenient conversation that they can immediately step into and become part of that conversation. Okay? Then you've got a solid body of knowledge. But if you're working at something that is linking between areas, and a lot of management is, okay, then you are not going to start from a single body of knowledge. When we talk about the literature just now, we're going to express that. But the body of knowledge is basically what other people have said with authority. Okay, is there something around there that somebody has said with sufficient authority? In what publication? Has it gone through all the rigors and pains? How many times did that one paper go through?
87.
It's an example of somebody that recently published that said it went through 87 reviews.
Before he submitted, he and his co-authors reviewed it 87 times and rewrote it 87 times.
So
This guy's a German, okay,
So by the time you get something accepted in some of these journals, it's been solidly reviewed. Okay, so there's authority behind that. It's okay, we can say that. So what you want to know is from that body of knowledge that has been established and is with authority, can I say there's a problem? At a doctoral level, you want to either go through it, somebody recently that said it's a problem, straight out. But if they've said it's a problem, it means that somebody else is looking at this. Because typically one of the starting points is to find something that declares that what you want to do is a problem. And sometimes people write articles to put that together so they can refer to that article as to there's a problem. And if you're working from a master's to a doctorate, that's one of the things you try and do. But if not, then you have to look at all the bits of literature and say, in fact, this one is a little bit this way, this one isn't quite happy, I don't like this one for this and this and this reason. So in the body of knowledge, this kind of solution that I want to put forward does not exist. It's new, it's innovating. So sometimes you're very lucky, you can get into a stream of conversation, sometimes you're not. Okay, you can stop. We're going to learn how to not do that. Okay, now we're going to start with what we were supposed to do today. Okay. We're going to do with the literature review. Now the reality is your literature review, your detailed literature review is your chapter 2. Okay? And we want you to be able to do that completely in your chapter 2. But in your proposal, you have to give a very, very good understanding that you know what the current body of knowledge is in this field. And also that you know where you're going to do your empirical research. So when we go through this, we're going to talk about how to do your literature review. Now, if you end up and the assignment says 25 pages or something like that, there might be an option to do a shorter view and you will get through your proposal. But the idea is for you to do as much. For the doctoral candidates, there's no opportunity for a shorter version, but some of the guys might be trying to do less. But you may only do that with the permission of your supervisor. Okay. We've talked about those things. Let's start. Do you remember this horrible slide? Remember the whole thing about a bird and what a birds are and things like that? Typically, when you start looking at the literature, it's very important to keep these things in your mind. Fundamentally, the first question that exists in any bit, in any article I take out of your hands, whatever, there is something in there that tells you what the author sees as the truth. How do they see the truth? What is the truth for them? Okay. We don't really deal with the variations in there, but that is a certain perspective of the truth. Okay. What is really important is around epistemology. Okay. Now the terms ontology and epistemology in some textbooks are just referred to as philosophies at a high level. But what epistemology is how do you know? Not what is the truth, but how do you know? From that, you make lower choices on what methodology you use, what methods you use, etc. And as we've gone through the initial, I think it was in the first presentation, there are certain types of methodologies that are closer associated with certain epistemologies. So if you see a person doing a qualitative research form, it is likely that they're not fully positivist. They're probably a little bit more towards the other side of the spectrum. Or if they're doing detailed questionnaires and they're doing statistics left, right, and center, then they are probably positivist. Okay, so you're really sitting from a fully objective positivist view to a subjective or interpretivist view. We spoke about that. So in the first one, there's a truth. It's absolutely a truth, and if you ignore it, it's going to jump on you. So if I sit there, I have the wonderful time, I've had way too much to drink, and I'm sitting on the edge of the building, and I believe I'm a bird, gravity is going to catch me. It's pretty real. So no matter what I do, what I believe, gravity is there. And a lot of your science, and in management science, there are people that absolutely do positivists. They're trying to take all of the value type judgments out. It is the truth, and according to them, this is the real truth. But unfortunately, it's not the only truth. Because on the other side of the whole thing, you're sitting with a subjective view, really stating the interpretivist view that says that things are only true because I experience them. They're only real because I experience them. I can only know about them because this is the way I experience them. And that's totally a different view. Probably most of the work that you're going to do is going to be somewhere in the middle, saying there's both the absolute and there's the interpretivist perspective in what you can know. Now, why is this important? Who has an idea? Why is this important aspect when we talk about literature? Somebody, or am I going to, yeah?
I think it depends what dit gaan maak of jy kwantitatief of kwalitatief
Okay.
quantitative.
Okay, so what she's saying is that when you're actually executing the research, your view is going to determine what methodology you're going to follow.
I don't understand everything you just said. I don't even know the only thing.
Okay, let's look at research that is totally positivist. Okay, I'm saying here that I am measuring intelligence. I am using the Wechsler scale, I am measuring intelligence, and I'm doing certain tests with this absolute value that should be absolutely perfect. And if I test the person and this is what's come out, that's the intelligence. So I do research and I try and correlate the difference between young girls and young boys' intelligence and the varieties thereof. This is the answer. Okay, I'm positivist. I believe this is the absolute truth. On the other side of the scale, I believe that, this kind of measurement of intelligence is a bit of a waste, isn't it? It's the way a person can deal with reality. It's the meaning they make. Intelligence is always within a certain context. It's always on the way that somebody experiences intelligence. And then in the middle you have emotional intelligence. It's a little bit of that. And it's a little bit of that. So it's in the middle. It says there's some of this in there, but it's not the whole truth. There's some of that in there, but it's not the whole truth either. Does it make more sense?
Yes, because it's linking up with your hypothesis.
A hypothesis fundamentally is a positivist statement. Because a hypothesis, you want to test to say it's true or it's not true.
What about other studies? What I
if you have 2 or 3 hypotheses, it means you've got 2 or 3 positivist, probably positivist, it's most likely positivist, kind of sub-questions. So it has different implications. So the way you know, you want to do knowing, if you look at a lot of people that want to do studies about the way students experience their choice of a tertiary institute, higher education, you're going to talk to them, you're maybe even going to talk to 1 or 2 people and really go into depth on the kind of things they experience. On the other side, you might say, okay, I want to know absolutely what makes people choose between different higher education institutes. Okay, and I do a questionnaire and they answer, and then I believe this is it and absolutely the truth. The thing that it does in literature is when you get an article about things that make students choose their tertiary education, the higher education institute, you have to know which side did the person that wrote it believe is the way that you know about it. Did that person really go into deep talking about people and how they feel about it? Or did that person do an incredible amount of empirical stuff and proved and said, this is the truth? Because that determines how you can use that information. If it's totally positivist, it's probably going to be difficult to use that to make a constructive, a real experience. But when you read something, you have to be able to have a solid knowledge on what side of the spectrum it is. Now, if you're going to do mixed method, you're definitely in the middle. It's not absolute and true and 100% that you're going large-scale surveys that side and in-depth interviews that side. But there's a bit of truth in that. It's more likely to be. But in the middle, you say, that's part of the truth, that's part of the truth. Let me construct some knowledge that has bits of everything in it.
So what is the truth?
That depends on your viewpoint. We're researchers. We don't make judgment calls. Although people treat research very often with the same kind of depth that they teach religion, and certainly if you go and sit in some departments or some faculties' review committees, there are some, especially the positivist guys, they believe that anything that side is unscientific. Can't prove it with statistics. There's emotion in it. We can't do emotion, we academics. Okay, so there are people that take it very, very seriously. But in reality, you have to know that there is a variety of perspectives about knowledge. And I am very firmly in the model. There's bits, I'm not going to have a disagreement with gravity just because I believe I'm a bird. Yeah? I have solid understanding of gravity. I know that I might believe I'm a bird as much as I want to. I'm still going to land up splat on the floor. Okay, I've got to deal with this one. On the other side, you know what? If I believe that in my mind I'm a bird, I've sat through many meetings drifting away. Just as long as some of you are drifting away. You've got your screensavers on at this point. So I've sat through many meetings and many classes, floating away merrily on my little aerial escapade. It's got nothing to do. But these are both truth to some level, isn't it? There's no absolute about it. If you feel uncomfortable about that, and some of you do, and I can see who it is because they've already crossed their arms, it tells me that you're highly likely a positive person. So when you look at literature, and you see literature that doesn't come from a positivist viewpoint, it's going to be difficult for you to integrate it in your argument. It's going to be very difficult for you and foreign for you to do research in the other areas. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of areas where people believe that dealing with this nasty thing is totally inappropriate. There are many people that only do this kind in-depth, small, value-laden kind of research. And there's nothing wrong with it either. From my perspective, the whole exercise is to move the knowledge out. But you will know from where you feel instinctively comfortable about where your views sit. And you have to know from where people write from, where their view is. Because there's a trick to mixing knowledge from that end and mixing knowledge from this end. So when you're going through your literature, you have to be a little bit aware of what they believe knowledge is. Because you can't put apples and little bricks together. Okay? Because that's a little brick and that's an apple tree. You've got to be able to put it together. In the middle, you can say, I want to make a garden. I have to have some trees, and I have to have some solid sculpture. This is what I'm putting together. But if you believe in bricks, make sure that the articles and the references you use come from the brick world. And if you behave predominantly from trees, then believe and make sure that the articles and references you use come from wild forest. Don't mix them unless you are aware what you're mixing and you know what that means. Okay? That's the only reason why this is so important. It determines. There's no wrong.
There's no right and wrong.
There's no right and wrong. Just as I've asked people, what is your problem? There's no perfect one. And that you will then expand to whatever length is necessary in your final document. Okay? Ideally, you want most of your literature done, not before your proposal, but you're allowed to do it a little bit later, but you've got to know what you're going for. And if you know what the structure is, if you know what you're trying to achieve, it's just that much easier to integrate information. Okay? Your literature review must be linked to chapter 1. Remember, it's chapter 2. That introduction is your magic link from what the end was in chapter 1. It should touch hands and there should be a golden thread. And from your literature review, chapter 3 or your empirical design should be clear, because you've said, this is the background to this empirical question, this is how people look at it, and this is what I want to find out. This is the background, and this is what I want to find out. These are the questions, whatever. So it should be a very, very clear area. Okay, I know that this doesn't feel. Practical arrangement. Assignment 4 does not have to be in by next Friday or by next Thursday, because we're having this review loop. We're going to give some extension. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking deeply to your supervisor about assignment 4. Okay? Anything else? You will get serious communications about that. We're trying to find out how deep the trouble is. Bye-bye. Yeah. See you Saturday.